Everyone wants your mind. Every notification, headline, and social media post is fighting for control of your attention and, ultimately, your decisions. But what if I told you the most dangerous prison isn't made of steel bars, but of invisible chains that you've accepted as normal? In a world where validation comes from likes and approval, true power has become increasingly rare, the power to think for yourself. Most people live their entire lives as psychological hostages. They make decisions based on what others might think. They measure their worth through others' eyes. They surrender their judgment to the crowd, and they never even realize the cage they're in. Niccolo Machiavelli, history's most infamous political strategist, understood something crucial. Those who control themselves control their destiny. The masses remain easily manipulated, their opinions swaying with each new trend. But psychological sovereignty, that's revolutionary. Today, I'm going to show you how to break free from external validation and build unshakable mental independence. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected. It's about becoming the author of your own life instead of a character in someone else's story. By the end of this video, you'll understand why psychological independence is the foundation of everything meaningful you'll ever achieve, and you'll have practical tools to claim it for yourself. The choice is simple. Continue letting others dictate your reality or become psychologically sovereign. There is no middle ground. Let's begin. Number 1. The validation fast, strategic social withdrawal. Have you ever made a decision and immediately told someone about it just to hear their opinion? Or accomplished something and couldn't wait to share it on social media? There's a powerful reason behind this urge, and it's holding you back in ways you don't even realize. Think about your last 5 major decisions. How many of them were subtly shaped by what others might think? We're wired to seek approval, but this wiring has become our greatest weakness in the modern world. Our brains have become addicted to the dopamine hit of external validation, essentially turning us into approval junkies. What most self-help misses is that you can't build true confidence by collecting compliments. Every time you seek validation, you're actually reinforcing a dangerous message to your subconscious. My worth depends on others' approval. This creates a psychological dependency as real and limiting as any physical addiction. But what if there was a way to break this cycle permanently? A method to rewire your brain's validation circuitry at its source. This brings us to strategy number 1 of 5, the validation fast. For the next 30 days, you will completely abstain from sharing your accomplishments, goals, or plans with others. Make decisions without seeking input or approval. When you feel the urge to share something for validation, and you will feel it intensely, simply document the urge without acting on it. This practice creates neurological space for self-validation to develop. It's like removing the crutches to strengthen the muscles. At first, you'll feel uncomfortable, even anxious. This discomfort is the feeling of your psychological independence muscles developing. The validation fast works because it exposes how much of your behavior is driven by approval seeking rather than authentic desire. Many people discover shocking truths during this process. Goals they thought were their own turn out to be performances for others. Decisions they believed were personal preferences were actually shaped by anticipated reactions. The most powerful moment comes around day 14, when you'll experience what I call the validation threshold, the point where you make decisions purely for yourself without the emotional need for external reinforcement. This isn't about becoming a hermit or avoiding feedback forever. It's about breaking the psychological dependency so that external opinions become data rather than definition. When you can receive praise without needing it and face criticism without being destroyed by it, that's the first step toward true psychological sovereignty. Start your validation fast tomorrow morning. Notice how many times you reach for your phone to share something. Notice how much of your motivation evaporates when no one is watching. And most importantly, notice how a new kind of confidence begins to emerge, one that doesn't depend on likes, comments, or nods of approval. Number 2, the Machiavellian mirror technique. Have you ever received criticism that ruined your entire day? Or praise that made you walk taller? If so, you've experienced firsthand how other people's opinions can hijack your emotional state. It's as if we've handed remote controls to our happiness to everyone around us. The average person lives at the mercy of external judgments. A single negative comment can override 100 positive thoughts about yourself. This happens because most people passively receive opinions rather than actively analyzing them. When someone judges you, their assessment feels like objective truth rather than what it actually is, a projection of their own reality. This vulnerability to others' opinions is the second major barrier to psychological sovereignty. And to overcome it, we need to learn from history's master of understanding human judgment, Machiavelli. This brings us to technique number 2 of 5, the Machiavellian mirror technique. Instead of passively absorbing others' judgments, you'll learn to actively observe how these opinions form in real time. When faced with criticism or praise, mentally step back and analyze what biases, insecurities, or agendas might be behind this person's assessment. Consider this example. Your colleague criticizes your project idea in a meeting. Rather than immediately doubting yourself, apply the Machiavellian mirror. Perhaps they feel threatened by your initiative. Maybe they're projecting past failures onto your idea. Or they might be playing office politics to maintain their position. This isn't about dismissing all feedback or becoming paranoid. It's about recognizing that every opinion comes wrapped in the other person's fears, desires, and limitations. By seeing this clearly, you transform from opinion recipient to opinion analyst. When you master this technique, something remarkable happens. The emotional impact of others' views weakens dramatically, while your independent judgment strengthens. You begin to see how opinions say more about the judge than the judged. The practical application works like this. For 1 week, whenever you receive judgment, positive or negative, pause and ask 3 questions. What does this person gain from holding this opinion? What fears might be driving this assessment? How much do they actually know about this situation versus what they're filling in with assumptions? Write down your analysis. You'll start noticing patterns. Certain people consistently judge from insecurity, others from a need to control, some from genuine expertise. This awareness creates emotional distance between you and their opinions. Remember, Machiavelli's greatest insight wasn't about manipulation. It was about seeing human behavior clearly, without the distortion of wishful thinking. When you understand the mechanisms behind others' judgments, they lose their power over you. The Machiavellian mirror doesn't mean becoming cynical. It means becoming conscious. It means developing the ability to extract useful information from others' opinions without absorbing their emotional baggage. This is essential for anyone who wants to maintain psychological sovereignty in a world full of judgment. Start practicing today. The next time someone offers an opinion about you or your choices, mentally step back and observe the forces behind their assessment. Feel the difference between blindly accepting their judgment and consciously analyzing it. Number 3, contrarian deliberation protocol. Have you ever found yourself agreeing with an idea simply because everyone else seems to support it? The human brain has a dangerous shortcut. We often substitute popularity for truth. This mental laziness is comfortable in the moment, but devastating to psychological sovereignty in the long run. Consider how many of your current beliefs you've never deeply questioned. Political views, career assumptions, relationship expectations. Most people inherit these positions rather than deliberately choosing them. They flow with the currents of social consensus without ever learning to swim independently. This mental conformity creates a fragile foundation for your life decisions. When the winds of popular opinion shift, as they inevitably do, those who haven't developed independent thinking find themselves disoriented, even in crisis. But what if you could develop an immunity to groupthink? A mental framework that allows you to find truth regardless of social pressure. This brings us to method number 3 of 5, the contrarian deliberation protocol. This technique systematically strengthens your mental independence by teaching you to adopt temporary opposing positions to mainstream views, including your own. For each important belief or decision, you'll force yourself to construct the strongest possible case against the prevailing wisdom, researching counter-evidence, and steel-manning opposing arguments. Here's how it works in practice. Select a belief you hold with certainty. Perhaps you believe entrepreneurship is better than traditional employment. For the next hour, you'll become a sincere advocate for the opposite position. Research the advantages of traditional employment. Find the legitimate downsides of entrepreneurship that enthusiasts rarely mention. Construct the most compelling case against your original position. This isn't playing devil's advocate superficially. It's temporarily inhabiting a different mental model with genuine curiosity. The goal isn't to change your mind necessarily, but to ensure your position is based on reasoned conviction rather than social conformity. The most powerful aspect of this protocol is applying it to socially rewarded beliefs within your circles. If you're in a community that values certain political views, challenge those specifically. This is where the greatest growth happens because it's where conformity pressure is strongest. When practiced regularly, the contrarian deliberation protocol creates a mind that values truth above social approval. You develop the rare ability to stand firm against majority pressure when warranted, or change your mind despite social costs if the evidence demands it. Machiavelli understood that the masses follow consensus regardless of merit, but psychological sovereignty requires the courage to face reality directly, even when it contradicts popular opinion. This protocol builds that courage systematically. Start small, with non-identity threatening beliefs. As you grow stronger, apply this to your core convictions. You'll discover that many beliefs that seemed solid crumble under scrutiny, while others emerge stronger, now founded on evidence rather than conformity. The ultimate benefit isn't contrarianism for its own sake. It's the freedom that comes from knowing your positions are truly yours, chosen through deliberate thought rather than absorbed through social osmosis. When you achieve this level of mental independence, you'll never again be swayed by mere popularity or intimidated by consensus. This week, choose 3 of your strongly held beliefs and give each 1 hour of sincere contrarian deliberation. Document what you discover about both the beliefs themselves and your relationship to social conformity. Number 4. Strategic value hierarchy. Mapping. When asked about their core values, most people recite pleasant-sounding words like honesty, family, or success. But when you observe their actual decisions, a very different set of priorities often emerges. This gap between stated values and lived values creates internal conflict and vulnerability to external influence. Think about your last difficult decision. What values actually drove your choice? Was it fear of rejection? Desire for status? Need for security? Our unconscious values often override our conscious ones, leaving us confused about our own behavior. Even more problematic, many of our so-called personal values aren't personal at all. They're inherited from parents, absorbed from culture, or adopted to fit in with certain groups. We defend these values fiercely without ever questioning their origins or whether they truly serve us. This unexamined value structure is the 4th major barrier to psychological sovereignty. Without clarity about what you genuinely value and in what order, other people's priorities will fill the void. This brings us to framework number 4 of 5, strategic value hierarchy mapping. This process helps you create a personal constitution by rigorously identifying and ranking your core values, independent of social conditioning. For each value, you'll trace its origins. Was it chosen by you or inherited? You'll test each against hypothetical scenarios where values conflict, forcing clarity about what matters most when trade-offs are necessary. Here's the practical application. Begin by listing 20 values that feel important to you. Include both conventional ones like honesty and less socially celebrated ones like comfort or pleasure. Now, for each value, ask, where did I learn that this matters? Can I remember consciously choosing this, or was it assumed? Next comes the crucial step. Create 10 scenarios where these values conflict. If honesty and loyalty clash, which wins? If family and career success compete for resources, which takes priority? This forces you to move from vague platitudes to specific hierarchies. The most revealing part of this exercise is discovering which values consistently rank higher than others, regardless of what you might claim publicly. This reveals your actual value structure rather than your aspirational one. The goal isn't to judge your values, but to make them conscious and deliberate. Once mapped, you can decide if this hierarchy truly represents who you want to be. Some inherited values will be worth keeping. Others you may choose to replace or re-rank. What emerges from this process is a decision-making framework anchored in your priorities, rather than external expectations or unconscious programming. When faced with difficult choices, you'll reference your personal constitution rather than societal defaults. Machiavelli recognized that those without clear personal values become puppets of others' agendas. Your value hierarchy is either consciously designed by you or unconsciously imposed by others. There is no neutral position. This framework doesn't make decisions easier. Confronting genuine value conflicts is always challenging, but it makes decisions more authentically yours. The discomfort of choosing between competing values you've thoughtfully selected is far better than the regret of living by values you never consciously chose. Set aside 3 hours this weekend to begin mapping your value hierarchy. Revisit and refine it quarterly. Your values may evolve over time, but the key is that this evolution becomes conscious and self-directed rather than reactive to external pressures. When you operate from a clear, personally chosen value hierarchy, you achieve a level of psychological sovereignty that few ever experience. The freedom to live by your own internal compass, regardless of social winds. Number 5. Sovereign response architecture. Have you ever said something in anger that you later regretted, or agreed to something you didn't want because you felt put on the spot? Most people's responses to difficult situations are reactive rather than chosen. Their emotional buttons get pushed, and they follow predictable patterns that others can easily manipulate. Think about your consistent emotional triggers. Perhaps criticism makes you defensive, maybe conflict makes you withdraw, or social pressure leads you to comply against your better judgment. These automatic reaction patterns form invisible chains on your psychological freedom. What's worse, people who know these patterns can effectively control your behavior. They know exactly which buttons to push to get their desired response from you. This predictability undermines your sovereignty in both personal and professional relationships. This brings us to the 5th and final technique, sovereign response architecture. This method replaces reactive emotional patterns with conscious response options. When triggered emotionally, you'll implement a mandatory internal cooling period before responding. During this time, you'll identify multiple possible interpretations and response paths. This transforms emotional triggers from automatic reaction points into opportunities for sovereign choice. Here's how to implement it. First, identify your top 3 emotional triggers. The situations that consistently cause you to react automatically rather than respond thoughtfully. For most people, these include some form of criticism, rejection, or conflict. Next, create a deliberate pause protocol for each trigger. When you feel that familiar emotional surge, silently count to 10. Take a deep breath or say, "Let me think about that." This small space breaks the automatic stimulus response cycle that bypasses your conscious choice. During this pause, run through at least 3 different interpretations of what's happening. If someone criticizes your work, it could mean they have valuable feedback, they're trying to assert dominance, or they're projecting their own insecurities. Each interpretation suggests a different optimal response. Then generate 3 potential response options, ranging from direct confrontation to curious inquiry to strategic disengagement. Evaluate each based on your long-term goals rather than short-term emotional relief. The power of this technique is that it converts triggers from vulnerabilities into decision points. What once yanked your chain now simply presents a menu of options. This dramatically increases your interpersonal power because others can no longer reliably predict or manipulate your responses. Machiavelli observed that the truly powerful remain unreadable and unpredictable. They respond based on strategy rather than emotional reflex. This technique builds exactly that capacity. Start practicing with lower stakes triggers before applying this to your most challenging emotional buttons. Like any skill, response sovereignty develops gradually. You might still feel the emotional surge, but over time the pause becomes more natural and your response options more creative. The ultimate test of this technique is how you handle your most difficult relationships. The people who have historically known exactly how to manipulate your emotions. When you can remain centered and choose your response even with these individuals, you've achieved a remarkable degree of psychological sovereignty. This week, practice the pause protocol whenever you feel emotionally triggered. Document the different interpretations and response options you generate. Notice how this simple practice immediately increases your sense of choice and reduces your feeling of being controlled by others or by your own emotional reflexes. You've now learned the 5 most powerful techniques for becoming psychologically sovereign. The validation fast that breaks dependency on external approval, the Machiavellian mirror that transforms how you receive others' judgments, the contrarian deliberation protocol that immunizes you against groupthink, strategic value hierarchy mapping that creates your personal constitution, and sovereign response architecture that converts emotional triggers into choice points. These aren't just theories, they're practical tools that have transformed thousands of lives. Start implementing them today, beginning with whichever technique addresses your most pressing vulnerability. Remember, psychological sovereignty isn't selfish. It's the foundation for genuine contribution. Only when you're free from the prison of others' expectations can you offer your authentic gifts to the world. The path to absolute independence isn't easy, but as Machiavelli knew, nothing worthwhile ever is. The choice is yours. Remain a predictable character in someone else's story, or become the author of your own life. Choose sovereignty. The next video the algorithm chose for you isn't random. It's your next tactical upgrade. Click it now and continue your silent ascent.